I want to welcome everybody. My name is Robert Fowler. I'm the Assistant City Manager here. I'm going to introduce Council President Sean Blake.
Thank you everybody for coming tonight. This is certainly a great crowd. This is a very important topic. Our preserve is very important to everybody here in this room, and City Council is very concerned about what's happening up there with erosion. But before I say anything more, I want to recognize members of our City Council in the audience. We have Janet Dowling, Council at Large. She's joined us tonight. Matt Donovan, Ward 2 Councilman. And I think that we've got Ray Kirchner. He's probably on his bicycle heading up this way. But once again, thank you all for coming. And I'll just say it one more time, we're really concerned about what's happening in the preserve. Every day the water lapping against the cliffs is taking more and more and more of it away. And I think tonight you're gonna see a really graphic explanation about what's going on up there. And if we don't do something, take measures to preserve it, we will continue to lose it. And I don't think any of us want to see that happen. So I'm going to get out of the way and let Robert come back up and get things rolling. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. I want to explain a little bit about the process. The city has entered into a contract with SmithGroup. The SmithGroup folks are going to do a presentation tonight. They're going to ask for your feedback. It's very important that you participate, give us your feedback. Council has asked for that so that it helps guide us in the decisions that we make. And SmithGroup has a long history of working in coastal communities, specifically in Ohio. And I'm going to introduce Michelle Johnson as our liaison to SmithGroup and the MC of today's festivities. So please welcome Michelle.
Good evening. So my name is Michelle, MJ. I am here with Chad and Jason. I'll let them introduce themselves in a little bit, but we are here representing our SmithGroup team with the City of Mentor, which we're very, very excited about. So there's some things that, as you're going to hear, are very concerning that are happening out on our lakefront, but it's also creating a pretty fantastic opportunity if it's something that you want to make an opportunity. And that's something that we're here to talk to you about tonight. We had, I'm going to burst my bubble a little bit on our survey results. We had over 1,600 completed online surveys, 1,400 identified as Mentor residents. So we heard loud and clear from that online survey that you care, you're concerned, and that you're willing to share your opinions, and we're really excited about that. So going through our agenda really quick, this is kind of what we're going to cover. So this is the fun part. We're actually going to put you to work. If you notice, we don't have boards with stickers or stands or anything like that. This is the first time in a public meeting I want you to be on your phone. So if you can pull out your phone, hopefully we have smartphones. If you go to menti.com, MENTI.com on your phone, it's going to prompt you for a code. And when you get there, the code is 6602-2735. If for some reason you get disconnected from this, on the slides that are the live remote polling, which is what we're going to be doing today, so we're going to be asking you questions as we go along. The menti.com address will be at the top of the screen, and that code will be at the top of the screen. So if for some reason you get kicked off, anytime there is an opportunity to vote on an option, you will see that information at the top. If for some reason something's not working, raise your hand. One of us or one of the city staff members will help you. And I want to make sure that I'm saying this, we're so grateful that you're here. This poll is 100% anonymous. We are not asking for your name or anything like that. We're going to ask for your zip code, and that's the only thing that's tying your responses is the zip code by line. Please remember to be respectful. There are some open-ended questions here that we're going to ask you to fill out. We're in a public setting. We're all adults. That's enough said. So that being said, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. This is not going to be a 2-hour meeting unless there are a ton of questions. We anticipate roughly about an hour, at most hour and a half, with the live polling going through. We will be here for questions and answers if it does keep on going, but we know that it's absolutely beautiful outside. We appreciate your time, and we'll get you home in time for dinner. So this is for practice. If anyone hasn't signed in, please sign in on the back. We do not ask for your email, but if you want to give it to us, that's great for future meeting announcements and whatnot. But the big thing is to have your name and your zip code. We actually use that for future grant opportunities, letting our grantors know how many people participated in these public meetings, and that really helps us from a public involvement and community investment standpoint. So that bar at the top where it says menti.com and the use code, that will show up anytime at the top that we're voting. For those of you that are just joining us, we are doing live remote polling throughout this meeting. So once you get seated, which I recommend because I feel like standing is going to be a little rough for about an hour, if you join us at menti.com.
We're stretching.
I know. 6602-2735 is our code. You can join at any time. I know no one wants to sit up front, but we have plenty of seats up front. All right, I'm going to move forward from here. So, SmithGroup is an interdisciplinary team. We are, I think, known around here for a lot of lakefront work. But we are full architecture, engineering, landscape architecture, planning, and the big thing that is wonderful to have in-house is we do have coastal engineering, and it's something that we're very proud of, that we work integrated with our teams. We do have a team of coastal engineers that worked on this project in the background, and we use CT Consultants, our local survey provider, for bathymetric survey as well as some upland survey. So we have a small team of people. We do have a Cleveland office right by the Chandelier in downtown, as well as 19 total locations in Shanghai. So even though we are local and based here in Cleveland, we do have 1,400 people across the country, as well as a small office overseas. So we're going to get into a lot of detail here, but we wanted to show you the project area. For those of you that did the online survey, there's a map like this, pretty similar, that you might have seen online. We're going to get into the sediment and transport direction. We're going to be pretty technical up front, letting you know kind of where we are from a coastal condition. And then we're going to get into some of the fun opportunities that we're calling fun opportunities. So we're going to start a little bit more with the serious, a little bit of the, I'm going to call it a Debbie Downer kind of situation of what we are faced with out there, and then transition into the opportunities of maybe what we can do with the shoreline, knowing what is happening right now and maybe where we can take it in the future. So existing conditions, if you haven't been out there, this roughly goes from east to west, from the top left, kind of circling around. When we get all the way over from the, west to east. At the west side is our most critical concern, and you're going to see some diagrams and some maps that show exactly how much of our shoreline is sloughing off. We have conditions that after our coastal engineers were out there, the recommendation was to close certain areas off. It's that bad. So it is falling at an absolute rapid rate, but then as we continue to move from west to east, things start getting better and better as we make that progression eastward. And then as you know, because we know that you love this space, on the very eastern side, we have a beautiful beach. And every time we've been out there, no matter what the weather, we see so many people out there. We know that you love it. We love it too. And that's what we're here to talk about. I wanted to very quickly go over some project goals. So we talk about restoration, preservation, protecting, and enhancing. These are all different. We need to do all four of these things. I had to do a quick Google search to get, Webster's dictionary and whatever else to get the exact terminology that we need. Restoration is absolute top of the list. We absolutely got to get this slope under control. But there are major opportunities for preservation, protection, and enhancement. That part of it needs to be part of that coastline, but part of it also is opportunities in the upland area.
I'm Jason, and I'm happy to talk nerd stuff like coastal engineering all day long. So I'm going to try to not do that, but talk about it at a high level. So wind drives waves, right? And when you have wind coming off of the land, it doesn't create a big wave. And so what these bars are saying essentially is the directionality of where the wave where the wind comes from. And then the color is talking about the intensity. That's really talking about how how hard it's blowing, right? And you can look at it through the different season and all those types of things. But what's probably more important for a lot of our work is what that does on the wave side of things. The predominant wave direction is out of the west for this particular project. And so if you know anything about living along the lake, you know that that moves sand from west to east. And that's really important to understand because whatever we do here has implications on the adjacent properties. And that's actually the case for everybody. Whatever we do along the lakeshore always has implications with one another. We do, as you see in this diagram, which lovely Chad will point to, out of the northeast, we actually do have a significant wave that can occur out of there. And we haven't had ice in the lake for a while, right? So when you do have a big wave out of the northeast, it's pretty impactful on the shoreline, particularly without ice.
That was the sandy condition, right?
Yeah. Michelle spoke about recession, the bluff moving backwards. And you all know this if you've been out there, right? At the west side, as you spoke about, that's losing about 8 feet on average per year. We looked at it over from like 1956 and we projected forward from data that we had. As you get to Sawyer's Point, it starts to become a little bit less. That's about 4 feet per year on average. And then you get to an area on the right-hand side or the far east that in the yellow is probably receding relatively slow. You're seeing some peeling back of that beach, and what will happen over time is that will continue to be an issue. And I won't go into details about it, but Freely would be happy to talk about why. This is sort of a joke, but the idea is, and I think it was acknowledged up front, if we don't do something, that's a choice. That is deciding something. And so the answer is we will lose the shoreline, right? So, and this is not necessarily 20 years from now, but this is sort of what coastal processes will want to do. They're going to find hardened headlands, 2 hardened points, and they're going to create a crescent beach between them. And so these sort of shapes are those crescent beaches that would be formed. And what that means is continuing to eat further and further into the upland area, losing a lot of trees and vegetation and recreation and all those types of things. So Chad is the guy who draws really well in the team. And so this is his section that describes it. And it's helpful to all of us, I think, because on the left-hand side, you can see sort of the condition that exists in some of the areas. In some areas, it's actually vertical, perfectly vertical. In other areas, it's slightly inverted, actually. And so what's important about that, though, is that in any solution where we protect, restore, whatever we do, the ability to push lakeward into the lake is really challenging. From a regulatory and permitting standpoint, Army Corps of Engineers and DNR are probably going to say no to that. We've had preliminary discussions about that already. What that means is, if we stopped erosion today, how would we do that? We'd probably lay back at the top of the bluff. And you're going to have to lay it back at something that probably resembles 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. So every foot of drop is 3 feet, right? 3 horizontal, 1 foot down. I can vegetate that. I can stop it from eroding. So conceptually, if we look at what exists today and we just translate that idea of stabilizing it and protecting it, however we deal with that, we can create beaches, we can create armored shorelines, we can do all types of things. It's going to have an impact on the upland. So what that means is if I look at this example, it probably means we have a slope that's been restored or a stabilized slope that is 60 to 90 feet in length, and then probably another 50 feet of working at the top of the bluff. That's somewhere around 110 to 150 feet of impact at the top of the bluff today. And as somebody spoke about earlier, it continues to move back. So we're just gonna keep thinking 150 feet from the top of whatever it is today, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. That's the reality of the condition in order to construct shoreline improvements. Talk about restoration strategies. There are a variety of different strategies that you can employ. Lower right's where I'm going to start, it's closest to me. Lower right is hard stuff. I'm going to rock the entire shoreline. From an ecological perspective, probably not an ideal solution. That land-water interface is actually really important from a species standpoint. And what regulatory has said is that's not, in their minds, compatible with a nature preserve. Now, conversely, if I go to the upper left corner, it's going to be soft green stuff. Think dunes and dune beaches. If there's over a 1.5 wave climate, those will get eaten up. We have more than a 1.5 wave climate. So the reality is, we're kind of in the middle. We're going to have a combination of structure and green, but in a really thoughtful and compelling way that actually can create habitat, can allow people to actually still enter the water, can allow critters to move back and forth. And that's sort of what we're trying to achieve with this. So when you squint at this, it may look like it has components of this, right? None of them are exactly right, I can guarantee that. But what you might see is cobble beaches, which are pretty resilient, pretty adaptive, have some benefit from a fish standpoint. You may see offshore detached breakwaters, like these, or hard little headlands like at the top. Maybe there's access right along the shoreline. All those types of things are things that we can achieve. So again, not the right solution exactly, but if you sort of squint at it, you can imagine it. So this is where we're at right now with this process. So the coastal engineers and our team got together, looked at it, talked through what it could kind of look like. So those little things that stick out in the water, those are breakwaters. The ones on the west side where Chad is are about 300 feet long, and in between them is about 300 feet long as well. And they're intentionally placed far enough offshore that the sandy scallops don't reach all the way out. That's in part because we want the sand to move along the shoreline. I won't go into that in too much detail. So there's a strategy here that's a series of offshore breakwaters that allows us to protect the toe of the bluff and create beaches, a variety of different types of beaches. There's also these, I'm going to call them blue squigglies. These blue squigglies, if you think about the sources of erosion, part of erosion is actually coming from the water side and waves, and part of it actually comes from upland. Your soils are really tight there. What that means is that you have a tremendous amount of, a tremendous amount of water that's being held in the bluff itself. That in itself creates weight, which creates instability in your bluff itself. So if we can right some of the upland drainage, that actually helps our situation too. So there's some rerouting of primarily two different areas of stormwater. I'm going to start over there on the far west. That's one corridor that we think would be beneficial because we can actually use the more natural stream course that used to exist versus a channelized one. And then on the upper right, there's what we're calling a constructed wetland and a sort of a back beach dune landscape that we're creating there. We're actually taking stormwater from those easternmost drainage areas, and then we're actually creating habitat and then also using it for managing and treating the stormwater. So those are also bits and pieces of this. So whenever we're looking at the shore itself, we also want to look at the water side of the upland as well.
And part of that is these drainage ways were impacted some time ago when the original development was done. They re-patterned this drainage. And so it is contributing, as Jason said, to soil moisture in the bluff. So when it is subjected to a wave of climate, it is greatly more impacted by those erosive conditions. And so by reconnecting that, not only is it better for the hydrology and habitat for this place, we're also taking some of the contributing bad things that are happening to soil moisture in the bluff itself, right? We know that we can reorganize some things, we can change those kind of amended patterns to be more reflective of the natural drainage courses that would have been pre-development, and that helps us build strategies for long-term stability for the bluff.
There's one thing I didn't highlight on here that is important if you've been out to the area, red dot. And that red dot is actually it is a cemetery that exists along there. And I think it's 4 heads, stone heads, if I remember it. And so what's interesting about that, interesting isn't the right word, what's challenging about that is it's actually in the zone that we know in order to protect that shoreline, we're going to have to pull back. So how does that work? Or are we going to have to push out? And that gives me a reason why I can work with regulatory and say I might have to push out in that area. Important to understand because we're at like 30,000 feet for tonight with what we're going to talk about, but it is going to eventually get to the point where we're making key decisions around that type of stuff.
And just so everybody's aware, Jason talked about kind of the representation of the offshore structures and the beach. This kind of sepia brown tone is that layback. That's going to be the area of impact that in order to meet that stability, that long-term stability of that bluff, that it's kind of a rote reflection of where that toe sits today and that 60 to 150 feet based on the conditions that we would have to kind of lay that back. That means anything in there is going to be impacted, those trees and landscape.
Where's the shoreline right now, do you think?
If you had to put it on, it's right on this leading edge between the kind of beachy color and the brown color.
Yep. So I'm not gonna, oh, sorry, I pressed the wrong button, and I'm gonna let you do that. So, let me go back. There we go.
Oh dear. Nice. So we're going to pull back out our phones. That information that you just saw is going to be prevalent as we move forward. So we want to make sure, so that's kind of the not so fun part, right? We're losing our shoreline at a rapid rate. I want you to think about, as we're talking about these opportunities, 8 feet a year on the west, 4 feet in the middle, and not as much on the east, but it's happening. So this is just to get our practice on, and we're curious.
If you haven't joined already, you just go to mentimeter.com.
So for those of you that are just joining us, if you go to menti.com, MENTI.com, use the code 6602-2735. And every time there is a voting slide that is actually asking for your live polling feedback, this information will show up at the top of the screen. Is anyone having a difficulty with the app or with the website on your phone? There is a guest Wi-Fi. What am I connected to? Oh, it didn't work? Okay. Got it. Okay. No.
Should be a city guest.
It's not called that. It's like ComGuest. C-O-M. ComGuest?
The city Wi-Fi is Comcast.
ComGuest. I did not need a password to log into the ComGuest. It just let me. Hopefully not everybody needs it and kicks me off. All right. So we're at 55 responses. This is awesome. Thank you. The power of social media. I'll let this keep going. I am going to move forward. So let's get in more of the fun stuff. We're going to go backwards a little bit to talk about our online survey before we move forward to talk about what we can do with all of this. We had 1,600 people respond to the survey in a completed survey response. We had more than that actually attempted and didn't finish. We're not counting those because it was only a 5-minute survey. So 1,400 people were identifying as Mentor residents. Round of applause. That is absolutely fantastic. That response just shows us how much you care and are interested in this subject. So you can see the map for yourself. I said 1,200. It was between 12 and 1,400. The online survey summary. There was a lot of things that were important to a lot of people. This slide in particular, you could choose as many options as you wanted of what, how are you currently using it? You'll see we have a lot of words here that are going to keep on repeating over and over again. But in this case, talking about exploring the water's edge or the beach, getting into hiking, walking, running, dog walking, all combined into one. Decent amount of boaters. Do we have any boaters in here that are either at the Mentor Marina or the Yacht Club? Awesome. Fishing, other. So I'm going to get into that other in a little bit. But then we start asking questions of, what is your current ease of access to actually get to the shoreline itself? Not just the preserve, but to get to the waterfront. And that's where things started becoming a little trickier. We definitely heard loud and clear that it's kind of hard to get to, quite honestly. It's there, we know it's there, but it's not that easy to get there. We heard that. And yet then when we start asking questions about preservation and other things that we can do here, we start getting into the overly positive, and this is as designers where it became a little confusing for us, that basically all 1,600 people wanted everything. Everything was important, and so that's part of the reason that we're here. We took all of that input of understanding, well, what does everything mean? How much is too much of everything? Where does that all occur? So you're gonna see on these next slides that preserving nature and restoration within the preserve itself is extremely important. That providing trail connections to the beach and to nature, in the nature preserve itself is extremely important. Seeing a theme here. Connecting to other nearby parks and trails, between important and very important, definitely on the, we want more side versus the we don't want more side from an overall theme. And then where should improvements be focused? Again, this was something that we didn't want to limit. We wanted to see where people's minds were. Everyone wants everything. So this is something that, again, we're going to need your help tonight understanding where do these improvements occur, because we don't want to do too much, we don't want to do too little, but we have a phenomenal opportunity here to do a lot of things if that's what you want us to do, or if you just want to do a little bit and a light touch, we can do that too. The number one focus of this project is that shoreline. Restoring it, preserving it, getting it to where it stops. We need to have human impact to stop nature from what it's doing, or else we're going to lose it. So this is where we start getting into open-ended. These are where improvement should be focused, and we created a Wordle because that was when you have 1,600 responses. This is the easiest way to start, putting things together. But you're going to see a lot of words reoccurring here, no matter how we phrase the question. Do we have any surfers in here? Thank you. We had over 30, not kite surfing, right? Like surfing. Yeah, we had over 30 surfers respond to this, and we double checked the survey to make sure that there wasn't like the same person typing it all. We did not have duplicate IP addresses. The 1,600 were legitimate, and kudos. We were really excited to see that. We heard you, so we're hoping that some of these things that we're going to talk about tonight will benefit what your interests are. Nature, number one thing here that we saw from the why are these issues important? And a lot of this was open-ended. The word accessibility repeated itself all throughout the survey thousands of times. Access, 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 access. Again, as designers, what do you want us to do with that? We need your help understanding what that is, where that is, how much is too much versus what's not enough. And then we get into just thoughts, ideas, concerns. Again, this was open-ended. We have all the results if you want to see them. We actually did do a deeper dive of this beach. I think actually your city engineer was like, it says beach, what am I supposed to do with this? What does this mean? So we dove into that. It was everything. We want more beach, we want better access to beach, we want longer beach, pretty much anything that had to do with more or positive or access. That's what people wanted. We took all 1,600, we actually did, we kind of converted all of the language into Excel so that way we could count. And these are basically the pared down online survey themes that we had. They kind of seem general. At the same time, we heard access, nature, beach, recreate, trails. We work all over the Great Lakes on coastal projects like this, as well as Ohio. The one thing we didn't hear, there was a couple comments here and there, but in general, people want this to remain a preserve. This is not some sort of development. Couple recommendations of having a restaurant or maybe even a public kiosk that had ice cream or coffee or, kind of a light touch. But in general, it wasn't that. It wasn't wanting commercial development, even though it is a preserve. We did not hear that at all. We just heard these words, access is purposely listed first because again, we heard it thousands of times. So what do we do with all of that? You're gonna start getting busy on your phones here, so have them handy. We started thinking about what is this area and how do we break it down? We have over 7,000 linear feet of publicly owned lakefront. That's incredible. What the heck do we do with it? So we started breaking it down into various areas. Jason talked a little bit about it. We have a lot of drainage that's occurring that is human constructed, human impacted at the top. that is creating some of these, quite honestly. So between our East Woodland, that we're calling it, our East Lakefront, Sawyer's Point, and Southwest Preserve, there's a lot of drainage features in here that we need to control and potentially maybe celebrate and do something with. We also have opportunities for that beach access. We need to hear from you, and there's going to be a very specific question dealing with how we want that beach access to be. But what does that look like? What does that feel like? Do we leave it alone? Or do we actually construct something there? What's on the, in order, the top is called cord walk. So it's not ADA compliant, but it's super easy to build. Basically, your service department could do it, where it kind of creates a semi-hard surface, but it's like sunken boardwalk. Cheap, pretty easy to construct. We start getting into elements of actual boardwalk that become ADA accessible, where maybe this is something at the back of ridge, not right against the water, but creating a ADA accessible, you know, whether it's a linear path, access to the water, there's all sorts of things we can do. And then there's opportunities to do quite extensive public promenades. Does become more of like a formal trail, where maybe if you're not able to walk on the beach, but you want to be right next to it because of, you know, preference or physical abilities, you know, whatever that might be, we want to hear from you on that. We're going to have a question about that. So going back and looking at the purple East Woodland area, we're going to start asking very specific questions that get into level of intensity. That's a word that we're going to be using tonight. How intense do you want these improvements? So the options, and these are sliding scales, and they're all, they're not mutually exclusive. They're all independent. Preserving it as is. Do we not touch that East Woodland area and just let it be? Do we maybe want to celebrate what's in there and expand access and connect to existing trails? Or maybe even we can take that a step further. Do we want to actually, you know, take those areas and provide small rest areas and overlooks in the center of the woodlands? Do we have any birders in the house? We had a lot of you on the online survey. We heard loud and clear. We know that you have a tower going into the south, a viewing tower, a birding tower. There are other opportunities based on habitat conditions. It's not going to be anywhere near the substantial structure that we're getting to the south, but there's some really cool viewing opportunities here that if you want that, we can create that. We just need to understand how much do you actually want.
All those areas are within the city's nature preserve, the acreage that belongs.
Yes, that's it. So the question was making sure that all of the areas that we are showing are 100% in the nature preserve. And yes, we are only looking at the publicly owned land. We are not looking at anything, you know, west or east. The only thing that we really did look at it for was obviously our shoreline restoration. We want to make sure that we are being a good neighbor and not creating things downstream, so to speak, that would negatively impact anyone on either side of us or, you know, further up.
We're going to ask this question across all of these different areas, and I think if we can kind of boil down or disseminate the information that Michelle kind of gleaned in, the access, nature, those types of things, what we're really asking here is what should we be doing in these areas to enhance them, preserve them as is? If you go out there today, I was out there today, and the first frogs are starting to kind of climb into the vernal pools, right? In another week or two, there'll be kind of choruses of frogs. Do you want to get close to that? Is that an educational opportunity that we should be enhancing? Should we kind of enhance some of the network of trails that are already there? And are there special amenities that take advantage of kind of that southerly aspect to the marsh? Additional kind of spots within there that we may want to take advantage of. That's really where we are at the heart of these. And we'll ask you similar questions poignantly to each one of these zones relative to kind of those highest of high categorizations that we heard from you as survey respondents.
All right. A couple more trickling in, and this is where it starts getting really important for us, is understanding, you're going to see the terms of enhancement versus light touch. Where do we want that kind of lighter touch? Based on, we have over 32 people who have already responded, we're hearing here that we want a lighter touch, that between kind of leaving it as maybe having a little bit of extra, this is not the area that we maybe want to focus those areas of improvements on other than the drainage features. No matter what, we're going to have to fix those. That is not a choice. It's just, do we add on elements to celebrate them, or do we just do what we need to do, fix them, and move on? And that is going to be standard for every single thing as we move forward. We have to fix the drainage. All right. So moving to the East Lakefront. We heard beach, 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 access, access, access. So what is too much versus what is too little? So what we're asking here is, do we want our existing, so this east lakefront area is currently what is your sandiest, most accessible, nice beach.
So the eastern part is only really accessible from Headlands Road, like either you walk in or you come in on your bicycle, and so are you suggesting maybe like a parking lot there? Because that's probably the best part, it's probably the hardest part to get to.
So the question was, are we proposing a parking lot? So we talked about that internally, and it was decided that no, from a parking standpoint, we did not want to add a parking lot, but you're going to see that because we heard loud and clear that people want more trails, we are going to be asking you about better connections to these areas. So you're going to see a whole bunch of trail maps that we're going to ask you to vote on that maybe are different surfaces and more accessible surfaces than we currently have, to provide more options, more access points, and better accessibility to it. But no, right now there is not a parking facility being included.
The parking will end up over by
The parking will remain where it is today, right now. Yep. Yep. And I'm gonna leave this up for a little bit here because I know, based on our online survey at least, that this beach area in general is incredibly important, and I want to make sure that we're getting the right responses, because this is a huge focus for us of understanding of what is the most, I'm going to call it, enjoyable part for most people. It's your stereotypical beach, and that is what's going to remain with that shoreline restoration that we're talking about. All of that sandy beach area that you saw on that map that Jason had up on the very western side is a little bit more cobbly. In the middle is going to be kind of that mixture of cobble and sand. And then the great news is that on the east side, it will be sandy and kind of that enjoyable, familiar type beach that we already have. So this one we're seeing a little bit more on the expanding the beach access, maybe getting us to some, connecting some existing trails, new trails. At the same time, we're seeing some people that want to preserve as is, so maybe don't do too much. There's a question in the back.
I'm real happy here of margin, additional parking. Will it still be the ingress for like walking from the east side?
Yes, all the existing will remain, and you're going to see our ideas of how to take the existing and maybe pair it up with some things that are new, specifically to close loops, create new opportunities. We are not proposing to change any of the existing. This is more of adding on a little bit. All right, I'm going to move on. Oh, I'm sorry. We are focusing, so the question was, it sounds like there's some tree cutting. I'm not as familiar with that other than for the tower. But we are really focusing on the kind of lakefront and upland portion itself. When we get past this series of maps, you're going to see a much clearer view of where we're talking about. So that will hopefully help.
There's a baseline of, if we make a determination with you as a community that we want to stabilize this asset from further erosion, right? We have the two options, the ostrich and let nature to take its course and we continue to scallop at 8, 4, etc. If we stabilize it, we are going to impact some of that area. That's the layback area. So in that particular instance, I just want to be honest and forthright. There will be impacts to the upland areas in order to get to that stabilized condition. Now, one of the things that we were just talking about today, that wood is amazing. We should be thinking about what we could do potentially with that wood. Is that something that we soil and save? Can we use it for something else? Completely parking lot sidebar, but it's something that is an asset that is going to be impacted that we're not going to be able to pick up and replant, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so to your point, some of those trails sit in that same general area of influence, and we would need to reroute those in order to maintain your access to these areas. Does that answer your question?
In the past, when they build steps now.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into that.
It's principally because we didn't have them protected from the wave line. So in this particular instance, we will do those things to make them more resilient, and they will be less apt to be damaged by future potential storms.
And then what happens to the people that are east?
So that is so the question, that's a very good question. After this, I'm actually going to wait till the end for questions if that's okay, because I want to make sure that we're being respectful of people's times, but we're going to answer this last one. So this is where our fancy coastal engineers who we love that are not here tonight really looked into. Jason talked about our pre-coordination meetings with all the regulatory agencies. Our solution, this is not final design, this is a concept, but we did do a basis of design report that's very formal, very scientific, very kind of technical. This is ensuring that that will not happen. This will not impact people to the east. It's sophisticated, it's complicated. There's a lot going on there. I will say that we are already, as a team, supporting the city by doing grant writing. We have a $20 million NOAA grant right now that we applied for that is a combination of restoration and habitat creation. We are actively thinking about it. We are working for you. We're from here too. Like we want this to be okay. So not only are we thinking about concepts, we are thinking about design, and we are actively looking for grants all the time for you. We have another one to talk to Dave about that we think is a great opportunity that we want to start working on now. So yes, we know it's falling in. Yes, we know that we cannot impact your neighbors. Legally, we can't. We're not going to get a permit if we can't prove that we're not going to do that. So that is absolutely something that we're not getting into tonight, but we have a 54-page report that'll show you exactly how our coastal engineers, with that design, the concept that you saw, is protecting our shoreline for now, for the future, and also for our neighbors. I'm going to move on from this one. So this is getting into the Southwest Preserve. This is where I think our strongest, we're going to save our questions to the end. We'll have time, I promise. Please write it down so you don't forget, and we'll go back to it. I want to make sure that we're getting people, out of here at a reasonable time, and we'll come back to all questions at the end. So in the Southwest Preserve area, this is where we have significant drainage issues that we have to correct. They are human created, and therefore they need to be human fixed. What do we do with that though? Do we just fix that drainage and just preserve it as is other than the drainage fix? Do we start utilizing those experiences? Because water can be really cool to be around and go through and go over, right? Wetlands and just all sorts of cool things, habitat, creatures. There's all sorts of stuff out there that we can do to make it a fun experience.
If we think about the principal activities that allow you to access this pink area now, it's an out and back trail, right? So there's a kind of the trail that connects and terminates in the lake. There's a trail that runs on the ridge that kind of gets you here. And then there's kind of the terminal piece here. That is the experience. So we're asking really, would we want to do things differently potentially in there to maybe make connections, to add things that could add to your enjoyment? We don't know what those are yet, but we can talk about it. Or do we just want it to just be out and back? And we kind of fix just the bare minimum of the drainage and coordinate the necessary improvements to stabilize the beach. That's really the ask here.
So I hate to do this to you, but I really have to ask my question. In an earlier slide, you showed what was called a cemetery area.
Yep.
How does that relate to the south boundary of Sawyer's Point, or is it within the Southwest Preserve area?
It's the red dot. The cemetery is the red dot, and that is a topic right now that we haven't quite figured out, because if we don't do anything, it's going to be in the lake soon, and regulatory knows that. So that is actually, Jason kind of alluded to it, is working in our favor, where normally they don't like us, as Jason said, pushing out into the lake and creating kind of an area that would stick out unnatural because of where our shoreline is currently. We are working on trying to save that. At the same time, the longer this process takes, which is at no one's fault, it potentially could go in on its own. So we are working with them. They understand that it's there. And we don't have the answer for you right now. We know that if we do nothing, it's gone. How do we move fast enough where it's not gone? And this isn't just like a simple well, here's phase one. We can just do this one little improvement. No, it's a very expensive thing. And again, we're actively working on grant money, but even from a permitting process, we're not sure that it's still going to be there by the time we actually go to construction. Our surveyor already wrote us this week saying, hey, since I've been out there doing your lead survey, it's already eroded more. We're like, yeah, it's happening that fast. So it's a great question. We're aware of it. We actually are trying to use it in our favor. we don't even know where it's going to be in, you know, a year from now. So we're keeping an eye on it, and we're working with regulatory to figure that out. We don't want them to be disturbed, obviously. Okay, I'm going to move on from this. So we are going to get very specific now. So that was very, very general as it related to ecological areas, because we have them and we kind of were able to group them. We're now going to talk about areas that are maybe a lighter touch, which we saw from that online or the live polling that we want some things, not too heavy, but we definitely want, for the most part, in most of those areas, minus I think the last one, we want connections. We want some opportunities there. Just don't go too heavy. We also have some very specific opportunities, what we're calling enhanced access, where everything that you're seeing in that thinner reddish color is existing. It's all out and back. We've all been out there quite a few times. You're out and back constantly. Do we want to close those loops? Do we maybe want to create new opportunities that connect one area to another that ultimately make a larger loop? We're going to go through these one by one with you, because again, we kept on hearing in the online survey with those 1,600 responses, access, 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 trails, 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 beach, beach, beach. Great, but where? And so these next slide sequences are really going to get into the what and the where. We will not be offended if you don't like something. These are just ideas, they're just concepts, nothing is set in stone. We need to understand where you want us to put, you know, pen to paper, so to speak, and really start getting creative. The other cool thing is that we have some really cool grant opportunities here that, depending on what we're giving people access to, whether it's educational, whether it's trails, whether it's water experiences, those all open us up to different funding opportunities.
I'll use one quick reference. We're sitting in a very purposely designed park that people are choosing their circuit, their loop that they're walking around. The majority of the experiences here are out and back, as we've already said. So in some of these preliminary things that we're going to show you, we're just closing that gap so that you can kind of create loops. Sometimes those loops touch amenities that are super and special. You know, up at Sawyer's Point, we have just some of the best aspects that you can view west and east and to the lake. And then in other instances where we have kind of a terminal piece, we know we can connect that to an existing trail with relative ease to kind of enhance people's enjoyment of this space and kind of foster greater connectivity around the space, is kind of seeing nature and the things why you come out.
So back to voting. We're getting into options of closing these loops. So the one on your left is, do we want to close that western left loop? The option to the right of that is, do we just want the middle access loop connection to close? Or third, do we want both? Do we want to close both loops? And then if you don't like any of those options, you can obviously click the neither.
I enjoyed your ability to do that. That was good.
No. So if you...
Oh, I'm sorry. At the top of the slides that have the voting mechanism, if you go to menti.com, and the code is 6602-2735. And if for some reason you lost your browser, you can always get back in at any moment. It'll count you when you rejoin back in.
Okay, can you read that slower for me, please?
It should be up there.
I know.
6602-2735. Sure. So the western left access, Chad, if you can point that out, is closing the loop of existing red trails. So the green trail is proposed, and it would close your existing trails that are already there in red to create a full circle loop. The next option is more in the center of your bigger map. That would close, we're calling it the middle access, but basically the existing trails that are over there that are out and back, we're proposing that those could close, the middle section could close the loop.
When you say close, you mean
Make a circle.
Complete.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Complete is the correct
I'm using, to complete the loop, to make a full circuit loop. I'm sorry, that was poor wording on my part.
I would say that at least the center ones at Sawyer's Point, you actually do already. People are doing that already. Like if I go out there, they're beating a path through there.
And the principal reason why we're saying it to the same chord that we mentioned and answered your question is some of the things that are out there now are going to be impacted by the city. So do we want to put that back? Is that something that is valuable, that provides us access to assets that we already utilize? So we're trying to gauge, yes, put that back. That's what it's an invaluable component. This is a lovely space. You all know that if you've been out. And then, you want to do the third one?
Yeah, the third one, just to be clear, is that we want both. We like the left, we like the middle, we want all of them to be complete loops, so that way, especially for runners, people don't like going out and back. Okay, moving on. So,
those are great questions. And so when we heard access, we didn't really get an opportunity to kind of poll you, the citizenry. What does that mean? Does that mean that access means just completing a circuit that enhances my experience? Does access get to the type of surfacing that means that everybody should be able to utilize those spaces? Is that done in some places but not others? How does that influence ecology? Those are probably a next layer of things that we want to get to with you in a future meeting.
Yeah.
But we really want to tease that out because that has implications about, if we think about the ecology and the preserve of this place, it has the ability to impact it, right?
The question was about materials. Have we gotten there yet? And the answer is no. There are certain things, though, that as we start looking at grants, when we start creating new access points, so we can leave your existing as existing, but typically if we're going to bring in grant money, it needs to be at a minimum ADA accessible. That doesn't mean that it's paved. There's crushed aggregate and things that do qualify as ADA. That is a next step for us. This is conceptual. We need to understand the what and the where, and then when we get into detailed design, and especially as we start learning about grant dollars that we're hopefully, knock on wood, bringing in from certain sources, it will help us dictate of, hey, if we want this $20 million, at least one of these routes has to be accessible. Maybe not all of them, and that, as Chad said, would be a future public meeting of, we got the money, we've got to figure out how to make sure that we're creating an ADA, accessible access point, and yet we're still preserving all the things that you love about the preserve itself. So that will be in the future. We understand that that is a huge element moving forward, but we are not getting into it for this concept plan. We've got to understand what these different alignments are that you want us to think about moving forward. Great question. So, it's getting a little busier now. So that option that we just talked about with the light touches, we're basically completing loops, and that was kind of it. That was the very light touch version. Again, when we heard access, 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 we did not know how intense you wanted that access to be. So this next site concept that we're going into really starts getting into access and really starts creating opportunities that get us to the lake more often, get us through the various ecosystems more readily and at various points. And we're gonna walk through them one by one. None of them are mutually exclusive. You could have, you'll see what we're calling these, but I'm gonna call it by color. You could have the purple line and maybe you don't like the red. So as you're voting on them, you are voting on all of them in isolation, and it will be our job to understand when we see the results of what you want compiled and how to make it a system that makes sense, that works from a design perspective, that works from a user experience perspective. So we're gonna go through them one by one. We know that there's a lot here, so we've basically alternated every voting slide with this map again. So you'll be able to see as we're moving along, because we understand that the screen's a little small for those sitting in the back. So hopefully we'll be able to refresh our brains of what we're looking at when we go to the next option of what slide or what segment that we want your opinion on.
Before you switch there, so the first one's going to be purple. So can you just describe, Chad, what purple is and what it's connecting?
Yeah.
Is it at the bot? Is it at the back of the beach? Where is that?
Yeah, so thanks, Jason. So this would build off of a loop potentially, but it would snake down this side of this slope here and provide us a means of providing an accessible route, right? We could keep that so that we could entertain a lot of folks, and this would be placed in that interface, as you asked the question, where's the beach? At the toe of this and providing access to a certain point here. As we kind of talked about previously, that could be boardwalk, a boardwalk, or some other kind of hardened solution that we could coordinate with the bluff stability. We're only asking you about, is this something that you would find beneficial? So as we peel out of the parking lot and you hang a left here, you could potentially get to the beach that way, right? And as Michelle mentioned, we might have ultimately other access points that allow you to walk sequentially and come up in various spaces, right? But for this particular instance, this is going to be kind of in isolation. This segment, which is more or less going to kind of run down this draw and get us to the beach, to a destination here. Yeah?
I feel like this might be a critical question for us, getting answers for this. Are the orange lines trails that already exist?
Correct.
Correct.
I called them red earlier, sorry. Yes, the orangish reddish lines that are a little bit thinner and not dashed are your existing trails.
We've saved $1 million, but we didn't want to do that.
I'd like to add to that the green trails seem to be ones that have washed away. They're nothing new.
In some instances, you are correct, right? And in other instances, this is kind of, you get to here, and maybe you'd like to go here, and yeah, there are probably some folks that range through here, but there's nothing formal.
There's nothing formal, but
Correct.
that's the trail everybody wants.
Correct.
Our green ones.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm going to move, you're going to see how this is. So you saw all of them at once, and now we're focusing just on that purple. For that purple alignment that we're calling the Western Lakefront Connection, our wording wasn't the greatest for this, but you get the idea. So the purple line that you're seeing in this small little image, do you like that? Do you not like that? Are you completely neutral on it?
And again, these aren't mutually exclusive, and the word prefer says that's the one. It's really, would you be in support of this particular trail? And that'll be kind of throughout all these trails, you'll see a similar kind of ask. Do you want? That's a great question that I can't answer, but I can get it for you afterwards.
The purple trail would probably be, I would
1,200
say,
feet.
no, it's probably longer than that because it goes, if you figure it, it's probably 3,000 feet.
So this is, if you recall from Michelle's, this is about 68 to 7,000 feet of frontage, just for scale perspectives, right?
Yep.
So we'll play that game throughout now, because those are very valuable.
And that's there in the parking lot?
No, we've got an existing trail that already exists, and so what we're basically doing is that gets us. You can actually take it back to this road here, but what we're suggesting is that if I want to get you to the beach, I'm probably going to get you up here, and if we kind of think about that trail for all of our users, we can carve that down in such a way, or place it more on the terrain that isn't steep, it's negotiable by a lot of different people, and it provides us, I'll say, an accessible, in quotation marks, route to the beach, which is important.
And I think to reiterate, when we talked about the coastal improvements that need to happen, all of those beige areas are going to be new beach. They're going to be varying in typology of sand and rock size, larger to the west and finer to the east, but you're getting a lot of new beach here. Whether or not you want access to it is different. We have to do that from a sediment transfer standpoint, no matter what, to save our shoreline. So do we want to get there now that we're going to have, like right now, it is dangerous to be there, but then we're going to have this really cool beach. So do you want access to it or not?
Group says yes.
Group says yes. So moving on, and I'm forgetting which one was next. Was it the gold or was it the, can I?
Yeah, flip and then come on.
Okay, you want to raise it?
So which one is this? This is
So,
go ahead
this,
because you already did that.
yes. So we purposely repeated the notion of closing the loop, i.e. completing the loop. I use the bad language up there too. We want to make sure that maybe you liked it on the light touch, but maybe you don't like it on the enhanced access. We wanted to repeat this question. It's the same exact alignment and the same exact questions as before. We didn't want to assume that just because you liked it in the light touch, you like it when we're talking about maybe it connecting to a larger trail, new access network.
So one of the challenges for us as we draw where the trails are is we need specific guidance. So that's why we're going through a granular sort of look at this, is because I actually have to, do they want access to this section of beach? So it's cumbersome, I realize.
And it's very braided in some cases because this is a preserve. Depends on where you sit in this kind of approach towards ecology, right? So in one instance, you could take a very extreme nation and nobody goes in there because we're preserving the ecology, right? And humans have influences on our environment. I'm not necessarily thinking or reading from this group that that's what we want to do, but we could control where we go with intent so that we can enhance the habitat. That is a real thing. We could also think very specifically about the type of improvements that we do and the impacts that they wrought, right? So in the past history, when those roads were cut, they negatively impacted and kind of created the situation where we are presently. If we go out there today, those woods are C+ healthy, I'd say, right? People would maybe disagree with me, but there's not a great depth of understory. We've got some introduction of invasives. We have a beautiful stand of hardwood, of mixed hardwoods, right? But we can do things differently. So that's really important as we think about all of these different improvements, and I'm onto my soapbox.
So I need you to now explain new soapbox, the blue line, of
Yeah.
what it is and where it's
So
connecting.
the blue line here is suggesting, it's enhanced connectivity from this baseline that we talked about. Blue line would potentially connect us and create a secondary loop. So everybody's been out to this spot, we walk the main spine, and we land here. One of the questions around access is, do you want access to the beach at that location, which starts at this blue line and potentially could include other opportunities to kind of create that connectivity. So blue line, let's just basically generally say that creates its own loop and potentially connects to purple. That makes sense? So these are layers of trails that begin to influence how we might access the beach.
I'm sorry to ask a question, but to me, I'm a little confused the difference between access to the beach and then once you get to the beach, are you making a path right on top of the beach?
We potentially could. So the answer is yes. We're talking about providing access points to the beach and potentially connecting across. And we didn't ask you in this specificity: is that a boardwalk? Is it a hardened edge? Is it a cord walk? Am I walking on the sand? Right? We're just saying that these points give this citizenry the ability to access the beach at this location with maybe some goal to connect it with some type of treatment that we can determine.
It could be just getting you to the sand, getting you out there, and then not having a facility. It's just it's 7,000 linear feet. So how many of those access points do we want to create? Yeah.
Yes, sir. There's at max 320 is what they're showing right now. Some of them are about 220. 200 to 300.
How far out are they?
About equal to that, depending upon which one you're talking about.
How far out?
About the same. So it's about 300 feet wide, it's about 300 feet offshore.
You know, it's going to be a silly question, but why are we so worried about trails at this point when we haven't even stopped the erosion?
Because that is a great question. It was, why are we worrying about trails if we haven't stopped the erosion? This is to understand when we do stop it, what do you want? Do you want more things? Do you want us to replace things? Do you want it to just...
So if I choose, so my solution on the protection strategy can be influenced by whether or not I'm including access as part of the solution. And you'll see a sketch in a few minutes here where you actually get on top of a breakwater structure, for example. That might influence the design of that structure. Mm-hmm. So that's primarily why we're talking about these at the same time.
So the next one that we're going to look at is the goldenrod. If you want to explain that one and the water features that's happening with that drainage path.
I hope all of you have been down here. This is a great little kind of pop mark little space. This is where the kind of topography peels and you kind of have this internal collection of most of the upland drainage. It's really special, it actually is. This is where I heard the first chorus frogs today. But this is basically just showing some type of trail that allow people to enhance and be in and around it, right? It could be boardwalks, it could be adjacent. We have kind of some topography that falls through there that's quite lovely. The question here is that something that you'd like to interact with? My wife used to work for and do development for a nature center in Michigan, and they had a wonderful boardwalk that set kids out, and they could go out and kind of survey the vernal pools. They could look at the salamanders, the frogs, and there was interpretive opportunities aplenty. That's something that could happen here, either programmed or kind of by proxy of just being there. So is that something, this internal kind of route in and around this collective drainage area, which is kind of a special pre-estuary type of environment?
And the drainage has to be fixed no matter what. I want to reiterate that as we're going forward, that these drainage and wetland creation and opportunities need to happen in order to quote unquote fix the site. So that is something that we want to make sure that we're being clear on, is that we're not talking about the water opportunities here. Those are going to happen. It's just, do you want access to them? Kind of a split vote on this one.
I'm curious, just to ask a question, I'm going to get myself in trouble with Michelle for getting off script. When we say no, why are we saying no? Are we interested in the ecological aspects of that? Are we interested in kind of preserving and targeting monies elsewhere? Would anybody care to share why they said no? Yeah.
I'm saying no to everything other than replacing the trails that already existed. I realize you have to go in there and clear your ditch and your path and everything, but I'm hoping in the next couple of years that all restores back to nature again. I don't want it all cement over.
Excellent. And I'm not sure, I don't think we would ever choose cement out here as a material, but I 100% understand. I appreciate you sharing. Yes, sir.
There is very little naturalized shoreline left in the entire Great Lakes system.
Yep.
And the Mentor Preserve is very unique and it's special, and the habitats there should be preserved as much as it can be.
Great.
Excellent. We got
Thanks.
a couple of people nodding in agreement. I'd love to get into that more specifically. We want to keep moving, but I appreciate you giving some context.
So this one specifically, because you've seen this before in some of our first slides, is this eastern lakefront connection. This is your current beach as it stands, but getting back to replacing what's already there. This area is eroding. It will continue to erode. We are going to be fixing it with the shoreline restoration project. Do we want there to be better access? Because we're gonna have to fill this back in. So this one is one of those that I think you were just mentioning, is that we have it now. We know we're gonna have a beach in the future because of what we are doing on the restoration project. Do you want us in the new version, once we create that shoreline restoration, to get you that access to that beach as you have it now? It'll be in a slightly different place, but it'll be pretty similar.
Pretty strong assignment for the answer yes here.
And this one we're actually going to get into. This is our only material typology that we're going to talk about the entire evening, because it's going to help us understand, because this is sand and this is not an upland trail, this is kind of that at water's edge trail. We want to understand what you are thinking for this one in particular. So that is coming. I can't remember if this next one or a couple later, but we are going to ask that question about the cord walk, the boardwalk, or maybe something a little bit more substantial on the back edge.
And that's principally in response to, I think, the earlier conversation around we can work in the areas that we can work, not wanting to adversely affect sand sediment transport, and also knowing that between two hard headlands, this is going to want to scallop, and this, if you recall, had the least amount of erosion. And so the solutions that we have here offshore kind of stop in this reach and change the solution that we need here. We understand, based on your responses, this is really important, and we want access and a walk along that beach because that's pretty special. And that could be walking on the beach, it could be some kind of structured walk through different lenses that we're going to explain.
So our last one that Chad's going to explain is basically wrapping an entire woodland ecosystem. So this is a very, even though it's a long trail, you'll see that we have very large void pockets here because there are woodland areas that we need to preserve, that we want to preserve from an ecological standpoint. And yes, we can get around it. And then one small opportunity to get through it, yes, there'd be boardwalk. We wouldn't be, again, we are moving that drainage out and away from here, from a human impact, human solution. Do we want access to that? From an education standpoint, from an this actually gets us the most distance. So for people that actually, we heard loud and clear, you want more trails, you want all of that. This is one of those that is actually giving us length, and it's away from the water. We're kind of far back on the upland.
So this would create a big easterly loop. I think if we were reading the tea leaves on how you responded previously, you said, I don't want anything out there. But this is a little bit, it shows you a little bit of where we're trending. There's a lot of trails out here presently, particularly along this south slope that people are kind of made in there. And this is kind of formalizing some of that. And so this is really kind of an exploration with you about, would we want to have access, visual access to the marsh? Would we want to encounter through that woods? How deeply would we want to do? We are getting to your existing stair, so this potentially could be a loop that gets you to an existing stair and the walk that you just told us you liked generally as a group, right? So it's not dissimilar from this one. This is just a longer way to get there.
And I am not...
It also completes the out and back loop that we talked about previously, or from the people coming from the east, they can kind of complete the loop in that fashion too. So kind of blot all over through that one.
And I am not a birder, but I do understand the importance of birding to our economy. It is substantial. From what I understand from the birding community, this woodland area, not quite as much as a lagoon that we have just south of here, but this woodland area is a great spot for birding. And so this trail would provide that access from a birding opportunity. Not that you can't see species along the lakefront, but there's something special about the woodlands back here that does create a birding opportunity.
Different species altogether.
Yeah, it's sort of, it's where it's very informal right now, but yes. That is, yep,
yeah.
Same.
It doesn't show up on the map as being a trail by any of the organizations, but we call them goat paths. It is so worn that it's showing up as a goat path. It's a human impacted footpath that creates because of active use. So yes, but it's not actually formally recognized as a trail by ODNR or even the city for that matter.
There's signs in the woods.
Yeah, there are signs. There are signs like if you go, there's a couple little ones.
Okay.
You'd have to like follow the sign, but you could, yeah, it's there. Yep.
They're by the beach access now.
Yep. Yeah, right there.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, I saw that.
But that's the same area.
Yes, it is.
So this is where we're going to get into the boardwalk, and then kind of full-on promenade question. We heard you loud and clear that we want the eastern lakefront access to this beach to be something. We want it to be replaced when we do the shoreline improvement project. What is it though? So, from an ADA perspective, the minute you get to the sand, especially if you have, any special needs, it is difficult to walk sand. Do we want to provide maybe some cord walk that is easy to install, cheap to install, which is on the top, that isn't ADA accessible or compliant, but allows a little bit easier access? Do we want to go full on boardwalk? That more expensive, but it really does truly create an ADA accessible path. And again, this is back from the actual water's edge. So this would be kind of as tucked back to the shoreline as possible. Or do we want this to be something more substantial? We're showing concrete here. We probably wouldn't do concrete out here, but it was the best picture I could find with the beach and water. That was something similar, so we're running with it. Do we want something that's a little bit more permanent, that is a little bit more of a gathering space, that actually creates movement of people, that you can gather a little bit longer, linger a little bit longer, and maybe not have to go on that sand to do it? So the picture should remain on your screen of the boardwalk, trail path, and then none. So if we're choosing no improvements, that just means that once you get there, you're just accessing the sandy beach, and there is no, human-built feature there.
The one on the far left
there's a boardwalk going out to the beach? Is that what you're?
No, that's the middle. That's my old project, actually. So no, that truly is an ADA accessible actual boardwalk.
Request for choice 2 there?
It would be that one.
That one.
Yep.
Because that's a really nice access there.
They can be done very sensitive ecologically, so you're not impacting species. And it can sit with a light touch.
Yeah, they ran all the way in.
That's actually a really good point. So even though boardwalk is more substantial, it's actually less impactful than cordwalk because we think about the posts are what's actually going down into the ground. So it's just those little posts that are impacting. Whereas if we were to do a cordwalk solution, all of those planks are actually touching the land, right? So even though boardwalk is more expensive, it actually is a lot easier to permit if we have to go that far because it's a very, very light touch on the ground.
That's good. That's what I would have anticipated.
On the east end, you're making a boardwalk. How far will that boardwalk go? All the way to the end of the park? Or will it end where those steps are now?
I think it's a logical termination to have it end at the steps, but I haven't really thought of it beyond that.
And I think we need to see the
There's no real
complement.
added value to extending it
Yeah.
east, if that makes sense.
And we also need to look at these results to understand when we start piecing and parting what people want to build versus not build, where is that logical termini? Where does it make sense to go to where we're connecting you to something compared to just a random out and back? I think we need to kind of understand and look at these results and really see, because some of them we're hearing you loud and clear. No, we don't want that there. Well, then what does that do from a complete loop system? How do you get from there to here and vice versa? I don't think we're quite there yet on where it's going to land, but there will be next steps.
That's very Susie.
I think if it goes to the end of the park, then it will actually start to encroach on the homeowners there. And that's what.
Oh yeah, we are only doing on public property. We are not encroaching anywhere on the eastern or western property line whatsoever.
Homeowners that have private deeds there.
Yep.
So it backs up.
Yep. I'm sorry?
You should buy private owners if you sign.
So we are doing a very general question here of we understand that we went through segment by segment by segment, and we absolutely are going to look at those individually, but we wanted to get a gut check temperature. Now that you've seen the light touch versus the enhanced access, where is your gut on this? Again, from 1,600 survey responses, which is not going away. You know, this is in addition to the online survey responses, this meeting as well as that. We had 1,600 people say we want more, we want access, access, access. What does that look like for you?
You're following so the good thing is that I think we're guessing now at what we're going to get responses for, so that's actually good. That we can. I feel like I'm kind of being able to guess it what you're going to respond with, so that's good. That's helpful. It means I'm sort of understanding.
And based on what I'm seeing here, from just a quick assessment of what I was able to see on the votes from before, there's a couple segments from the enhanced access that people really liked. Great, so we can grab a couple of those, make some great experiences, but in general, it's not going to be the overwhelming enhanced access that we originally were talking about with every single segment being constructed. I think there's some really cool opportunities that we can really focus on, which is great because that helps us understand that where to focus our design, where to focus our money, and where to focus those grant opportunities. So I'm going to turn this over to Chad.
You stay right there, I'm loud.
Okay. Can everyone hear Chad? Because this is important.
Everybody can hear me, right? Cool. All right, so we're aware that when we show you all of this myriad of diagrams, that diagrams on a page or squiggle don't necessarily equate to your experience as you may have been out here. So what we try to do, stab in the dark, is provide you some visuals with which to react, to kind of equate your experience. I think as Jason said, you've given us some really good feedback, and I know where this is going to generally land, I think, which is we probably went a little bit far, but what this begins to do is illustrate the things that we heard from that survey. Without this touch point here and the additional feedback that you've provided, we heard access, nature, preserve, and we know as a starting point, we have to start at stabilization. So in these illustrations that you're going to see this kind of green sward. that effectively represents from the existing condition, more or less this fuzzy line that you see here, I have to lay that slope back. I have to impact anything in there, trees, walks, otherwise, in order to meet that stabilized condition. As Jason said, it's usually going to be predicated on some kind of landscape reinforcement. We can revegetate it with trees, we can revegetate it with, you know, it's probably an approach towards succession, right? We let succession happen, we revegetate that with grasses to start, and we can even plant trees. But that is going to be the condition. And what that affords us with the offshore structures that Jason mentioned is we are now going to be able to capture sand, carefully, I don't want to use that word. We are going to place sand that is going to give us a beach that is kind of an enhanced opportunity for you to kind of access and touch the water. Now in this particular instance, this is at Sawyer's Point. You kind of gave us resoundingly like, pull back, we're not really interested in the enhanced option. But when we were drawing this, we kind of showed, we've all been here. This is the terminus of where you are presently. Actually, you'd be out here somewhere right now, but it falls off precipitously.
There was a staircase right there.
There was a staircase here. So what we're showing here is some kind of staircase connection that you could get from top to bottom. The other thing, as we heard from you, access, we said, well, maybe the assumption is that access means that everybody can get to the beach, and that stairs, in some cases, provide a barrier to everybody. So in this particular instance, you kind of see this walkway kind of carved down to the beach. We can create a walkway that would be accessible. We can either do it at slopes that don't require handrails, or we can do transitions that's a determination and design. It's kind of like the material. If you say, yes, that's something, we can get you there, right? And we can figure out the details. Now, the other thing that Jason mentioned is, from an enhanced perspective, we're creating these offshore structures. We also have the ability potentially to put you out there. Maybe there's fishermen in here. Or maybe you just want to go out there and see the blink as the sun goes down, right?
You have it right there. Right?
Yeah, so here's a perfect example. Right out here, we have a walkway that kind of creates a loop over the water. This would give you the opportunity to kind of create a circuit, right? You can be out here. No access to that one, but this would also provide us access to kind of step onto the beach and begin the walkway that goes east to the east property line and connect to our stair, right? So that's kind of the approach what we're having here. Now, as we got here, we had lots of conversations as, this is a really special opportunity. Let's take a stab in the dark and show what an observation deck could be. This could be a great place. You guys may say, no way, no how, way too much, light touch, and we've heard that, right? But when we drew this, we did that. You know, would you include a shelter out there? Question mark. Probably know the answer to that.
Open air shelter.
open air shelter, right? But as we think about enhancing the experience or kind of meeting the needs that you, the community, get to decide, is this something that you could envision as a level of support?
Before we vote, I also want to make clear that from another reaction of why, again, these are just ideas, this is not what's going to be designed. We heard loud and clear from the survey, the online survey, that we want to be in the water, next to the water, over the water, through the water, like everything. But yet we also heard natural preserve. So how do we get all of those opportunities to do all of those things and yet still make it natural and whatnot? These are just some ideas that we're not proposing, but we start talking about landing spaces from an ADA standpoint. What maybe this could be, a simple deck. Do you actually want, we're not doing a birding tower, but do you actually want something like that? We're not quite getting to that yet.
And because she jumped, this also shows that completing the loop that we talked about from kind of the main trail to one of the ones that already exists. So this little wiggle that you see here and a little kind of clearing just to kind of represent that's also in there. So we've got a myriad of ideas. Yeah.
So the 3 votes that we're asking you for, and I believe it should be letting you only select one, is I like the overlook deck, I like an overlook deck with a shade structure, or I don't want an overlook deck here.
Did you have a question?
You guys are actually like being consistent. I like it. It's good. I anticipated the answer. That's good.
I was curious if the 1,200 people that surveyed are being petitioned to vote on any of this? Or were they notified of this meeting?
So there was,
Survey or the email?
yeah, there was on Facebook, it was on social media, it was on Twitter.
Did you physically contact the surveyors?
No, because email address, the people were not contacted because email addresses were not required.
Is your question that you think we need a broader audience, or is it a
No, I
question
just
on
think
how do we advertise?
You're going to be very narrow here. I'm okay with that.
We understand, it's in, it is in combination with, this isn't, the online survey isn't an end all be
You have a
all.
lot of people that aren't here if you have 1,200.
Correct.
Yes, that's true.
And
That can sway everything.
there are also very common trends if you sort it out by age group, which I would say we were very happy to see on the online survey. We had a wide variety of ages, which we typically don't in online surveys. So we were very happy to see the breadth of the residents and the breadth of the ages. There was definitely tendencies based on age of what people wanted versus didn't want. And I think that's something that as we dive into this and start looking at the preferences from tonight, you showed up, this is important. All of your responses here are important. We understand it's based on people's availability, this is just one meeting, but you're here and we're hearing you and we're listening, and this is a process and it all kind of builds upon itself.
Yeah.
How many acres do you have to clear to make that?
We do not,
Probably next to nothing, because that bluff is going to have to be regraded irrespective. So the answer is probably not much.
Was it specific to the overlook that you were asking the question with? Yeah. I mean, we can make it any size we want.
again, this is on stilts, so this is the nice thing about, compared to, a trail, for instance, the impact is only what's touching the ground. So you think about, whether it's an I-beam or whatever it might be, stick built, it's just that little impact. So this is building in and adjacent to and with the land. This is actually one of the least impactful pieces that we actually have on here because it's not on flat earth. Yeah.
From a coastal engineering standpoint, I believe the intent you guys are going for here is to lay that hill down where we lost the stairs so that it doesn't slide again. So, when you say it shows stairs in the drawing, I'm going to call that a step trail because you're going to lay that hill down so we don't keep losing it throughout the whole area.
You're going to have to.
Yes. Okay. So,
Yeah, but providing access from the top of that bluff down to the bottom, and how you exactly accomplish that.
well, I realize that, but I'm architecturally trained.
Right.
I see a structure that isn't very big on very tall stilts.
Sure.
That's a serious angle. I was assuming from the initial part, that small little structure would be 5 foot at one end and touching at the other, not 25 feet in the air, like it should. Because that's what we're losing. We lose it when it's a 25-foot drop over 25 feet is when it goes. So,
Sorry to interject, but the number of deaths in the Great Lakes on rock walls is very high. So I would just caution anyone that wants to make rock walls, break walls that are easily accessible to people. I don't want to see people die.
That's fair. So this western node is in a completely different area. This is actually different than Sawyer's Point. These trails and this access is one of the ones that was actually heavily favored. So of the enhanced areas, this was one of the ones that were like, hey, we really like this. We understand that there's going to be some new beach here. We want to kind of celebrate this area, where some of the other ones were not, including Sawyer's Point. We saw that in the reflection. So I'm going to have Chad, and this is kind of our last piece here, and then we'll open it up for more questions. This is celebrating something completely different that we wanted to put out. Again, it's an idea, it's a sketch, it's a concept, but especially knowing, I'm curious to see how this one is responded to, knowing that the trails is something that you wanted here. So this kind of takes it a little bit, I'm going to take one step further, I guess, as it relates to celebrating and creating access to education as it relates to our drainage abilities here, or requirements, drainage requirements.
Yep. So first of all, can't hurt our feelings.
Yes.
These are ideas that we kind of promoted. So whether you like them or don't like them, this is your project. The group here and the citizenry gets to kind of vote on this. So we're happy to receive this feedback. It's as important to know what you don't want to do as what you do want to do. And so this has been a great dialogue. So for this particular one, as Michelle mentioned, Sawyer's Point is right here. And, you know, the mouth of the yacht club is over by Jason. Where this dumps out is where kind of the land peels back, if you remember that drainage area, and it does empty up and end its way to the lake. That water finds its way to the lake eventually. And as we talk about kind of the needed layback here, and Jason talked and Michelle talked a little bit to your question regarding the cemetery, this area right here is one of those areas that we're trying to think about. Right? We want to make that resilient. We know that's an important monument that we want to retain, but we also have this kind of incredible ecological system that's coming in here. We're going to influence that from a grading perspective. So do we take advantage of that? Do we make this whole by ecologically kind of thinking of this about a series of pools that kind of connect and daylight into the lake here? And would we ever entertain some kind of physical connection to do those points? It could be a supported boardwalk. It could be a linear walk like this. It can happen at grade. It could be in the air. We can do it here. Again, we're showing a point that kind of building off of. This is an existing trail that connects back. This is one of the loops that we talked about. Would we want to have an access point that gets us down to the beach at that point? We've heard some comments about getting out on breakwaters, completely valid, and we appreciate those comments. So this is kind of summarizing some of the opportunities. Some version of this is going to be impacted. So how do we put that back in a way that becomes a community asset, and do we leverage that in terms of interpretive education and the unique kind of confluence that is forest, wetwoods, and lake, which is pretty cool.
The drainage, that the water that you're seeing coming from kind of the top left down to the bottom right-ish, center right, that has to happen no matter what. That is one of those areas that, because of what we did as people before, people now have to fix. It's just, this option is, do we celebrate that, especially from an educational standpoint of getting, you know, kids to water, and eco equals money. So this was us trying to come up with everything that we heard in the online survey of access, access, access. Is this an opportunity to move forward as it relates?
River, it's more like our Polar Creek.
Yeah, right? And sometimes it would be dry. This is not going to be wet all the time, but it will be wet a lot. So depending on the rainfall, depending on what's going on, this could be a dry bed sometimes, and that's okay. That's part of nature and education as well too. So to keep things moving, oh, you're going to start seeing my movie quotes now. Okay, so the responses on the left are no, I don't like it, neutral, still in the middle, and yes, nope, and you betcha for us Midwesterners. Yeah, they get better.
Yeah, they do. You're almost done.
Yeah, you can say that we're getting to the end, so we started getting a little bit more playful. So this is about how we feel about creating an interactive educational experience. So this isn't about the trail, this isn't about the overlook. It's like, do we want to celebrate a notion of having some sort of educational feature, experience, or something like that? This is more than just signage. This is actually creating kind of a there as it relates to something for especially children, adults too, but something for children to experience. All right, I'm gonna move forward. So how do we feel about creating nodes at these areas? We already heard that you wanted the trails. How do you feel about actually creating kind of these like stopping points where we can see the water coming down, seeing the lake, whatever it might be, gathering, resting, whatever you want to do there? These are the elf quotes.
I believe this is, if it doesn't exist, don't create it, is what I'm saying.
Belongs on the naughty list.
She was tired.
I was tired. Got to get my kicks and giggles somehow.
So this is
That water is gonna be, yes, we are gonna have to bring that water from the top through there. I think you saw the consecutive,
It's a matter of if I then want to make it a thing that you can get to.
and you can walk along the beach and get there. It's more, are we making this purposeful, celebrating it basically, and spending money on it? Is that where we want to put some of our effort? Okay, 36 people. So this is getting to the notion of this overwater trail experience. Again, very little impact because we only have 2 touchdowns and it starts creating an aerial piece that gets us from one side to the other as a totally different thing, but I don't know that we have in this region really. Do we? Holden, yeah.
But we're not talking about that kind of height. I think what we can reasonably achieve with this, based on grading, is you're talking about something that's 10 or 15 feet high max, right? If you did something like this. The other thing is, it could be a boardwalk that sits 8 feet high, or that doesn't impede kind of the hydrology of what we're trying to do. Sir, in the back. Yeah.
In regard to how elaborate all that would be, once you guys are done, the community is the one that's going to be taking care of the, however built up this whole park would be the community taking care of it.
For sure.
That's correct, and it's probably no different from some of the things that already exist out there. The wonderful overlook that's kind of immediately on our left as we go out to the marsh. These are probably a very similar character in that regard. And so the ask here is that something that we want here? I think what we're resoundingly seeing is, no, that's okay.
And it's not required to complete the loop?
It is not.
No.
Okay.
It is
Nope.
not.
This is an add-on, basically. Okay. So, this is a little random, but we wanted to ask. The closest restroom from the lakefront is over 3,000 feet away. Now's the time to ask. This would be tasteful, classy, all the things. Do we want some sort of restroom facility out here? We'd have to be mindful of where we placed it. We don't know yet. If you've ever traveled with little kids, herding cats when it comes time to go potty. So understanding, do we want something? We're not talking where yet, but we want to make sure when we go back and, talk with the city that we understand, at least from this group, do we want to start thinking about a restroom facility?
Yeah.
In the past, is you come out of the parking lot and you take the very first left, it kind of wanders through the woods a little bit, you can see the marina below, and at the bottom of that trail, you always had a public outhouse until COVID came. And you could use the restroom if you needed to.
I think, though, what we're talking about from that location, that's probably not where we'd put it, because it's still really far away from the lakefront. I think it's looking like people are...
There is presently a new facility that's right adjacent to the trailhead. I think what we're asking is...
way out.
From that trailhead, and I understand where you're talking. Yeah. Yeah. And so, would we put it there, or we would put it closer to kind of the center of Mass and where people might utilize it? So the answer may be no, in your opinion. Or is there something like, so a very similar type of Romtech toilet that's out there presently can go with a light touch closer to the beach, and maybe it extends people's stay.
And it's nice now in Ohio, we've luckily had updated park permitting for vault toilets, so we don't have to, if we don't want to, carry out full water and sewer and have those impacts. We can easily permit a very isolated vault. Yes, you'd have to, have trucks with tanks, but we don't have to pull that water and sewer if we don't want to. Again, it's looking like this is favoring towards yes. At the same time, where it would be, would it be publicly watered sewered versus would it be vault with Purell? Those are future decisions, but we wanted to know, at least, do we entertain it? So it's looking like we'll entertain it. We'll talk about it with the city. There's still a lot of decisions that need to be made, but we didn't want to just assume that you wanted that type of structure out there. That is the end of all the hard work that you did. We really, really appreciate your effort tonight. I told you we were going to put you to work. So we appreciate everyone bringing their phones, participating, especially with how beautiful it is outside. We know that you have other things that you could have been doing. We are so grateful that you're here. We are here to answer more questions. I know we were trying to, keep them to a minimum, but we kept the conversation going. So if you have more questions, we're happy.
Come on up and if you want to come and talk about specific things.
Let's do a couple open-ended just in case there's things that other people are thinking. We'll keep it going for 10 minutes or so, and then we'll be here to answer more questions.
Those structures you were talking about out in the water, that's similar to the breakwater system they have on the First Island, that really does a lot.
Similar to their ones aren't really effective for reasons, but it's very similar to that.
And is that going to be the very first step?
I think what we've heard from people tonight and what we've heard from the city is that stopping the erosion is good. And so the methodology for that, that's what we're looking at for a variety of different reasons. But yes, that would probably be the first step on that.
Sir,
If grants fall into place, which is always an unknown, what do you foresee as your timeline on this?
I can give you at least okay, so if I look at it from a permit-only side, regulatory agency for approvals, you're probably a year to 16 months for approvals. So you have a bunch of, from where you are right now, you have, let's just say, probably at least 2 to 3 years, probably 3 years before you start construction.
Regulatory won't accept our design plans until we're about it depends on who you're dealing with, but I'm used to 70%. Sometimes Jason can submit at 50%. It just depends on who we get assigned. They will not accept us a concept. We have to be full into CDs, construction documents, to even trigger that permit process. So we have a design period, a submit period, the permit period, and then we finish those designs. So a year and a half to 3 years, 2 years to 3 years.
I'm on the board of directors for Lake Development. So I'm really familiar with those processes. We just went through Mentor Harbor. So when I was asking, I said, well, trying to educate people here of the time frame that we're really looking at. This isn't something that's happening this year, next year.
We can start the process this year.
And get the process designed and everything else. But it isn't happening as soon as it would be great to have happen and save each.
We are doing pre-coordination with all of the regulatory, so that will help us. They're familiar with it, they're excited about it. This is going back to the original question about what's out there, this is something that isn't in Ohio. Your situation of how fast you're falling in, how steep you're falling in, this is a very, very unique solution that people are excited about. It's kind of funky, it's what we need to do, but it's different and it's getting people talking, which is a good thing. We're hoping, again, knock on wood, for grants.
Yes, sir.
You have a history of doing these in many, many areas. What percentage of the cost of the project is global? You're going to get grants, but there's a certain percentage that's going to be local.
Everyone is different, so I will tell you that the NOAA grant that we applied for, just because it is so substantial, it's never been awarded to a Great Lakes area before. It is typically, right, never? It is saltwater focused, just because that's who's on the appropriation committees and that's where the money's going. So we're making a hard case to go in Great Lakes. That one we needed to have some teeth in the game, so we applied for $20 million and we put in a $2 million match. But they're all different.
And just a comment for your next time or on the city website, you need to show the drone pictures that the city has of the erosion along that coast. You can see how dramatic it is, only trees are in the lake. And it's not getting any better.
That's a good point. Yes.
It's a quick two-part question. Have y'all made an alternative analysis yet?
So we have a basis of design report from a coastal engineering standpoint, but no, from that part, we will be diving into detailed design and we will understand from our permitters exactly what types of alternatives that we're going to need to develop for it.
We did actually talk with them about 3 alternatives. They were not supportive of many of the other alternatives. That's where this was derived out of. So the answer is, we've not formally, but the answer is we have at least explored it with them to know that they're somewhat receptive to the idea.
Thank you. And then who makes the final decision on the selected alternative? Is it Mentor, ODNR, Army Corps of Engineers?
Yes, and yes.
Yes, that would be correct because the answer is if you can't permit it, you can't build it. So the answer, so it's a combination of all. Thank you very much. Yeah.
I've been down in the lagoons for a long time. Before the roads got real bad the last 5 years, we did have a nice little beach area at the end of Mentor Lagoon, at the loop at the end. That was used as a beach. And in emergency, we put up a bunch of broken concrete and left a cesspool behind us. Will you ask the city of Mentor if you can add that into your project and try and fix that area? Because what you're creating here is basically taking the entire area and making what they have right there at the end. So you're doing it's better and it's got more because it's got the books in there. But I'm saying I think it's gonna be used more like that beach was used by at least the boating community. So I'm just asking if we can try and fix what was created there.
I think the answer is that spur that was added is something that ODNR had a hand in, which is surprising to me. And the city also had a hand in because they were trying to address erosion. So the answer is, I think there is a solution. We have to address how do they work together. That's a good point. Sure.
I'm not sure if it's the same area, the east end of the harbor entrance, the west end of the nature preserve. They did armoring, I believe, in 2012.
Yeah.
So our experience is that the erosion has accelerated since then. So has that been looked at in any way? I mean, going back and maybe undoing some of that damage, if that's the case. And then I was also curious, has the coastal geomorphologist been engaged with any of these plantings? Or I know you mentioned coastal engineer. I don't know if that's the same thing or not.
They're certainly different. Nearshore down cutting as a result of weight reflection off of structures like you're talking about is actually and so the placement of those structures so that you're not energizing the nearshore and you're not promoting the beach cells to leave and the beach to leave is important. What the issue that you experience over there, and it's a broader thing throughout the Great Lakes, is the fact that the amount of sand moving along our shorelines has changed. The dynamics are no longer what the dynamics should be. And that's because we've modified our shorelines, right? I think somebody brought up earlier that the shoreline has changed. I think we brought up earlier that the shorelines have changed. 90-some-odd% of Lucas County is armed, right? And the reason is we no longer have the sediment supply. So the answer is yes, that would be a part of what we're having to do. And the answer is like some of the structures, if not done correctly, can have an adverse impact.
Okay, because as a surfer, we're using the Sawyer's Point area.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you guys lost me pretty early with the groins because that would basically eradicate the surfable waves and swell from coming in there. And then from like an aesthetics point of view, if you're looking out onto the lake, do you want to look at a big pile of rocks or do you want to see, a natural sight line?
So your options are, honestly, I would bet the very edge of the shoreline as it stands today, which DNR has said, now you can have.
Right. They won't permit it.
I'm going to annually put in 200,000, not annually, I'm going to put in probably 20 to 30,000 cubic yards annually along the shoreline. I'm going to do huge nourishment project. You can look up Elena Beach State Park. Look it up online. It's a big nourishment project we did. Just sticks stand out there and then it goes away. And you can do that with regularity. So you have those, that's another strategy. The answer is I don't think that many communities find it acceptable to put in the case of Illinois Beach State Park in Illinois. That was 492,000 cubic yards. Let's say $40 a cubic yard. And I can't do math.
It's between $2 and $1 million annually in nourishment.
And the answer is that's just going to move. So if you want to protect your shoreline, you have to find a strategy that balances all these things. So I appreciate where you're coming from with the idea of stone structure, but I have only a certain number of tools in my toolbox. And the answer is I can prevent the edge at the bottom, which nobody really wants regulatory to improve. I can nourish it, and you're going to have to continue to do that in perpetuity. Or I can stick some structures out there purposefully, and that's kind of the way you can get it. So I appreciate where you're coming from, but it's just...
And we are going to remain up here. We're going to, I believe, close down questions right now, but Chad, myself, and Jason will be up here to answer any other specific questions. Again, thank you. We have a lot more now to digest, and